Welcome back to GCSAA TV Live. Next up, we're going to talk about sod cutting and the advantages of a primary mover, such as the Steiner 450 tractor, presented by Ryan and Steiner. And joining me today is Matt Schaefer, owner of Minimalist Agronomic Techniques. Thank you for joining us, Matt. Welcome. So let's talk about sod cutting. What are some tips for sod cutting? Can you give us some tips, like what time of year is best or what kind of depth to cut at?
Well, anytime you cut sod and you want it to establish, the thicker you cut it, the quicker it'll establish itself. Now, if you're buying commercial sod, they're not going to give you any soil, because for weight purposes, when they ship it, they want it light. Plus, they don't want to give away their soil. So, consequently, it's not going to establish as quickly as if you cut it yourself.
Interesting. Okay. So, what are some best practices for storing sod? I mean, when do you store it? How do you store it? How long does sod keep? I'm not sure.
Well, I mean, it won't stay on a pallet very long because they normally give it a good liquid shot of nitrogen. Plus, they water it, so it'll heat up really quickly. So, if you have to keep it for more than 3 days, you should probably lay it out on bisqueen or plastic. But I mean, if it's cold out, you got to keep it warm, and if it's warm out, you want to try to keep it in the shade.
Is there an ideal temperature to keep it at, or?
Well, I mean, I know, there's companies that ship bentgrass sod, and they historically bring it in on reefers, refrigerated trucks, and they're about 65 degrees.
Okay.
But golf course superintendents, field managers, they don't have that option. Historically, if you're sodding, you're either doing construction. So, it's not about the most opportunistic time. It's just about you got to get it done.
Got it. Can you give us some tips about establishing sod? So, how do you prepare the soil? How much do you water it? That sort of thing.
For me personally, as a golf course superintendent, I never really wanted to over-amend the soil unless it was in fine turf. And historically for us, we did a lot of, we had a tremendous amount of golf. So our walk-ons and walk-offs would really get worn out. So we would do a lot of the banks. And so I tried always to make sure that it was on native soil and not over-modified. And then we would loosen it up because, half the problem with the sod dying was compaction. And so we'd loosen everything up and level it, and then we'd always put a nutrient package underneath it. Now, a lot of guys don't do that. A lot of guys prefer to put it on top. But the biggest problem I always saw with that is the plant is already under severe stress because you sod cut it.
Sure.
So, put a low burn fertilizer underneath it and try to stimulate the roots to get after that fertilizer. And then, that'll help initiate rooting.
Excellent. How long before the sod can withstand traffic?
Well, if it's in the NFL, they cut it really thick. They bring it in big slabs. They'll lay it down on a Monday and they'll be playing football on Saturday or Sunday on it.
But that's for the thick stuff.
Right. So if the realistic part, is, I've built a couple golf courses and, you're always running behind the 8 ball. And, your owner is spending tons of money. So he's not interested in having you say, well, we got to wait another 4 weeks until everything's knitted down. Historically, if you pen it really good and you can move the traffic around, 48 hours. But we've sodded and in 3 hours later, we opened it up.
Holy cow. Does that, how does that affect the play?
If you're really, really good at sodding and you have a great sod cutter like Ryan,
yeah,
and you can really, really cut your sod and really get it dialed in, and you just don't even see it. If you're really good at it,
all right,
you can't see it.
And you're probably really good at it. So.
Well, I'm really good at training people that are really good at it. But I learned how to sod at Augusta National, and we were good at it.
Okay. So how do you get good at it? What are some tips for laying sod?
Well, the biggest thing is, particularly if you're cutting your own sod, you want to keep the width consistent so that you don't have these zigzaggy lines.
Yeah.
So real straight edges, and then everything butts up real tight. And then you want to make sure you don't trap air under the sod. So a lot of times what we would do is if we did bent grass greens, we would lay it down and then we'd soak it and then we'd put Lawan plywood on it, and you got to get the seams, and then we'd run a 2-ton roller over it and boop, open it up. Go for it.
No gaps, no seam?
No.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit about the pros and cons of sodding versus seeding.
Well, seeding's always better.
Okay.
Okay, but it's not always practical because seeding takes a long time. I mean, if you're seeding bent grass, in all reality, you're looking at, 60 to 90 days. If you sod, it's conceivable that you can be playing on that green in 21 to 40 days, depending on weather. Under ideal conditions, really good weather, optimum growing, really forcing the issue, you can get it ready in 3 weeks.
Wow.
But there's no way you ever get seed ready that fast. Wealthy golfers are always about, immediate results. They pay you the big bucks, they want big results.
Of course. So when is the best time to do sodding?
Well, ideally it's spring and fall, and not necessarily when the grass is under tremendous stress. Like in the South, in the wintertime, it's just, those guys are really working hard because it's not optimum for the grass to be, it's not growing, so to sod at that time is really difficult.
Sure.
For them, the most optimum time is the summer. In the North, it's the fall and the spring.
Okay, that makes sense. Winter's not when you should be doing it.
No, but I sod it a lot in the winter, because the members aren't there.
Okay.
And that's what golf course superintendents do. We get paid to do the unrealistic and make it happen.
Good point. What about summer?
Summer's tough. But you can do it. But it takes a lot of TLC. You've got to be there to water it and nurture it and take good care of it. It's way more laborious in the summer.
And you have all those golfers to deal with,
right,
working around them. So tell us a little bit about the equipment and tools you use to do it.
So, I don't know, it's like there's certain pieces of equipment that everybody just knows. And like Ryan sod cutters are the standard in the market.
Okay.
I used to get like big, I worked at some pretty robust clubs. And I'd go in and the equipment be bad and I might do a $3 million lease, right? And I'd look at my equipment inventory and there was always one piece of equipment on there that was 15 years old. And it was a Ryan sod cutter. They just don't break down. But sod cutting has always been kind of rudimentary. And then Ryan really stepped it up and they made it hydrostatic drive. And then they put reverse in it, which was just huge.
They didn't have reverse before.
No.
Okay.
You had to spin them. And then you had to, so you didn't ruin any sod at the end, you had to put plywood on it at the end. But you had to lift it up real quick so you didn't hit the plywood with the blade. But now you don't have to do that because you have control over your ground speed, so you can ease it up, then you can turn it back up, get realigned, and then you can slow down or speed up, and that helps you with the quality of the cut underneath. Plus, it keeps you from going wobbling. And they have a line lock. They have on some of their models, you can lock the wheels so it doesn't deviate. It will, but you got to work at it.
So what are the benefits? We had mentioned in the opening primary mover. What are some of the benefits of a primary mover like the Steiner 450?
Well, I'm a farm guy, so I grew up on a farm, dairy farm, and we had like some big tractors. And so I'm oriented that way, we didn't have in golf we have a lot of different machinery that has its own power source, so it's really expensive. Because in reality, you're paying for that power source. So if you have a primary mover like a Steiner that can facilitate a whole bunch of different jobs, it saves you a tremendous amount of money. And then a Steiner is really a cool piece of equipment because it has a super low center of gravity, so it's really, really safe. And nowadays, and no insult intended, but a lot of young guys don't have a lot of experience with equipment. So putting them on a tractor is dangerous. But I tell you what, you got to work hard to flip a Steiner over. They're like glue, and they're articulated in the middle. Mm-hmm. And so it gives you tremendous stability, plus it gives you an interesting way to get traction. They have crazy traction. They're four-wheel drive. They're really a simple unit. You know, they could have made it really, some equipment nowadays is entirely too complex. But Steiner's really, really smart because they have a great design and they're not going to overcomplicate it because they can. They're going to simplify it so you can work on it.
So it's a piece of gear that replaces a bunch of specialty equipment.
Oh, absolutely.
But it's you're still saying it's a fairly simple piece of equipment in its intelligent design.
Yeah, and the attachments are real fast to hook up. So let's say, for instance, you're going out to get ready to do a sod job, and you have a bunch of uneven surfaces, or it's compacted. All right.
Sure.
So you can put an aerifying head on the front of it, loosen up all the soil, then go out, unhook, rehook into a blade, and they have a couple different blades, and then you can back drag it, get everything leveled out, and then you can compact the area with the tires, and then you're ready to. Instead of having 2 or 3 pieces of equipment there, you can do the whole deal. And then if you don't have big budget, which most clubs really don't have huge budgets, now you have an opportunity to buy one machine that can do 7 or 8, 9 jobs. That's a big deal.
Savings.
That's a big deal. And then their implements are built so well that, like, after you have 3,000 or 4,000 hours on it, if you don't want to put a new power unit in it, like you don't want to put a big, you don't want to upgrade it, put a new engine in it, maybe refresh the hydraulics, which you can do, or you can just go buy a primary mover and the attachments will always fit.
In addition to the attachments that you've already mentioned, what other attachments can we...
They have power broom, which is really, really good for cleaning your parking lots. Plus, it's also really good for doing light snow. You know, and particularly like the club I was at, Marion, had slate sidewalks. Man, if you put a plow on them, you got to relay all those slate.
Yeah.
You know, so what we did is we power broomed them.
Okay.
And then they have a great blower. You know, and the thing that's really cool about the blower is everything's in front of you, which is a big deal. Now, like people say, oh, Matt, we can do all that with our tractor. Well, you can, but everything's behind you. Everything is in front of you, so you can actually see what you're doing. Plus, the blower is real low to the ground. And so, you know, it's really, really effective at blowing leaves. Instead of your air going up over the leaves, it goes underneath the leaves.
So you have a lot more control over what you're doing.
Absolutely. And then they have, you know, great snow blower, unbelievable snow blower. They have a couple different blades. They have an articulating mower for doing banks, a rotary that's out of this world. They have flail mowers, 60-inch deck, 72-inch deck. You know, I know I'm doing them a disservice because I can't remember everything they have. But I mean, I got to tell you, I worked at like 8 different clubs, and I've had 6 Steiners, six Steiners at every one of them. It's one of the very first units I buy because in Hershey we had 81 holes, we had 6 Steiners.
So you mentioned the articulating and 4-wheel drive, oscillating. What are the advantages of having that versus, you mentioned the stability. Certainly.
Oh, it's safe.
Yeah.
Really safe. And it's easy to turn. You know, I mean, it's hydraulic steering.
Okay.
And so one of the problems with equipment is historically, and when I was a kid, I rolled a tractor, got hurt really bad. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for farm implements. But I got hurt because I turned too sharp and it flipped over. So you can't do that with a Steiner because it can't possibly do a 0 turn. It just doesn't.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, but it's hydrostatic drive, so it's run by your hand, and your feet are free. So everything's done by hand, and then you have a steering wheel. So you can just steer forward, backwards, and then when you're cutting, that's a big deal. It's really easy, like with a flail mower is really cool because you can go forward and then pull back. Like with really high grass, it has a tendency to drop down. So, you know, normally you'd have to come back around and grab it, but not with a Steiner. The action of actually pulling it back, you stand it up and then you go forward and you cut it again.
So we have to wrap up here, but I did want to ask, so that explains why the Steiner is so good for maintaining slopes. Because,
Oh yeah, it's another thing. It's unbelievable. When I originally demonstrated, this guy told me, and I mean, I used to run motorcycles, motocross when I was a kid, and I was pretty fearless. And he said, "This will take you anywhere you have enough guts to take it." And I thought, well, that's a challenge, you know. And we had this tee that was stupid steep, and I took it right up over that thing. And he was nervous. He thought it would actually run out of power.
Wow.
But it didn't. And it's a diesel. It's a
handled it.
3-cylinder diesel. I think they're Kubota engines, I believe is what's underneath them.
Excellent. Well, Matt, thank you so much. That's all the time we have for this segment. I appreciate you joining us and telling us about the Steiner and sod cutting. This has been enlightening. Excellent. Be sure to join us at 1 p.m. to learn more about putting green surface management here on GCSAA TV Live. Thank you.